What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, August 14th, 2018, getting into the week here, about halfway through the month. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. And let's just get right on into it because there's a lot to talk about today. We're going to start with the Syrian war report here. Here a war, there a war, everywhere a war. It does seem like, I guess it's time to call it a world war. We're in World War III already here. Apparently, the Syrian Democratic Forces, now that is not part of the Syrian government, that's one of the U.S.-backed rival groups, and they're responding to claims that they were in negotiations with Damascus, saying it's completely fake, it's fake news, no, they're not negotiating, it's victory or death, and so forth and so on. Apparently, Russian air defense forces were able to intercept and destroy 5 unmanned aerial vehicles near Khmeimim Air Base in the province of Latakia. And according to the head of the Russian Center for Reconciliation of the opposing sides in Syria, Major General Alexei Tiskenkov, the UAVs were launched by militants from the Idlib de-escalation zone, which that's again the rules. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to be fighting in the de-escalation zone. That's why it's called de-escalation. But that's what's going on here. Yemen has held a mass funeral for all those children killed in that bus attack, which was carried out by Saudi coalition forces using a U.S.-manufactured Mark 82 bomb. And needless to say, the funeral drew a huge crowd and a lot of attention, certainly in the foreign media, not much here in the U.S. Corporate media, of course. And the burial took place in Sa'ada, a northern stronghold of the Houthi people. The article is still spinning, they're the rebels. No, the Houthi are the government. What they're calling the government is the government the U.S. wants to install, the so-called internationally approved government, meaning a U.S. puppet. But the Yemenis do not want a U.S. puppet. Anyway, the Saudi coalition is saying its actions in bombing the school bus and the civilian marketplace were legitimate. No, they weren't. They were not legitimate at all. You do not bomb civilians. You do not blow up a school bus full of kids out there on a recreational trip. Now, to their credit, CNN did air some of the footage of children who survived the attack being treated in an emergency room. And so this is getting some well-deserved attention. The International Committee of the Red Cross is out there basically saying this was a terrible thing to happen. And it was. I mean, war in and of itself is a terrible thing. But war is supposed to be between 2 uniformed armies who know they're supposed to shoot at that other uniform. You don't make war on civilians. You don't make war on children. So, meanwhile, America's newly declared economic war on Turkey has basically ended any possibility of direct talks with Iran. Not that that was looking like a prospect anyway. Iran's attitude is you pull the sanctions first, then we'll talk. And the U.S. attitude is you do what we tell you to do first, and then we'll pull the sanctions. So it's not like there's going to be a meeting of the minds. And Iran knows that an invasion is basically the ultimate objective as soon as the government can figure out some way to convince you, the American people, that there needs to be a war in Iran. You know, because the Iranians are bad people and they dress funny and they speak a different language and you should hate them. Oh, anyway. Over in Korea, Koreas, plural, I keep forgetting to do that, basically they have agreed to hold a 3rd summit in September, next month, between Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in. Now, this will be their third meeting. They had the first meeting in April in the demilitarized zone. Then they had a more informal summit in late May, and said at that time, more summits are there in the future. I think Kim Jong-un's plan is to go ahead with reunification, at which point he doesn't have to worry about a U.S. invasion. And Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in may just unilaterally declare the end of the Korean War, at which point you'll see the United States stand up and say, no, 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 that war is not over till we say it's over. That's our war. We're in charge of that war. It's not over yet. But that would really be the smart thing for them to do. Reunify, and at that point, the U.S. loses all rationale for renewed military activity in the north part of the peninsula. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, we mentioned this briefly last week, but it's worth talking about again, because apparently last April, during the U.S., British, and French strikes on Damascus, apparently one of the Russian warships homed in on a U.S. stealth nuclear sub for hours. Now, it's described as an Ohio class, and the only Ohio class that we knew was in the area is what are called the so-called arsenal ships. Now, these are Ohio class SSBNs that are no longer carrying nuclear ballistic missiles because of treaty limitations. And what they've done is they've taken the single missile out of each launch tube and put in a rack that holds 7 Tomahawk missiles, or Standard missiles, which can still contain nuclear warheads. And they're called arsenal ships, or SSGN class. And there was known to be one of those lurking around the eastern part of the Mediterranean. But apparently this Russian warship was able to find it and track it for hours on end. Now, a couple of issues here. The Ohios are getting old. They're not the latest technology. I don't know why they're even describing it as stealthy. I mean, the Ohios were always meant to be as quiet as possible for that very reason. But you need to understand something about submarines. Nuclear boats make noise. The quietest submarines are the diesel electrics. When they're running on battery power, they are very, very difficult to hear. But nuclear reactors make noise, especially those with circulation pumps in the primary cooling loop. And this being an Ohio class, I think that applies here. And if you know what to listen for, they are possible to detect. So, of course, the Pentagon is seizing the story to say, see, you got to buy us some new submarines. We got to have new submarines. Now, we don't want to be driving the old submarines. You know, they're old and noisy and they're all scratched up, and we don't even like the color on those things. We need new submarines here, and you got to pay for them. No, we don't, actually, to be very honest. Now, the U.S. Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer USS Carney has gone into the Black Sea, in fact, just 2 days ago, according to the press office of the U.S. Naval Forces Europe. And the ship is up there to conduct maritime security operations and enhance capability and interoperability with allies and partners in the region, the usual, you know, mill-speak kind of a situation. Now, you need to understand that up there in the Black Sea, they're only allowed to stay a little while. There are treaties that cover operations in the Black Sea, and only the nations that actually border the Black Sea are allowed to basically operate there continuously. All other nations, there is a time limit. Now, the USS Carney is the exact same class of ship as the USS Donald Cook, which, if you will remember not too long ago, was absolutely humiliated by a Russian electronic warfare craft, to the point where the crew was reportedly traumatized because they believed in their ship. They call it Aegis arrogance. You know, we're unstoppable. And they got stopped cold no less than 12 times. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here from Steve Elkins. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, John Stadmiller yesterday on his show had mentioned, and I can't find any word of it, any mention of it, but supposedly FBI officials had touched down in Mena, Arkansas, and something with the Clinton investigation, whether it's to gather documents or an investigation, or, as we know, the FBI maybe mop up everything and remove the tracks. I don't know. Did you hear anything about that at all?
Yeah, we talked about it on yesterday's show, and I posted a couple of the articles to whatreallyhappened.com. Basically, there have now been 2 of these flights of fairly large aircraft. I think it's a 757 that flew down to Little Rock, and they loaded it up with boxes and boxes of documents, and was flown back to Washington, D.C. And everybody's all excited and said, see, they're finally investigating the Clintons, but like you, I'm cautious. Knowing that the Clintons are untouchable, it could very well be that they're simply getting rid of the documents and making sure that there's nothing incriminating in them.
Yeah, that's what I think would probably happen, knowing the history. That's it, Mike. Hey, thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. Okay, now, recently there was this Helsinki Declaration that was supposed to calm things down between the United States and Russia. Here's the interesting part. Russia wanted to include mutual assurances of non-interference in elections from this proposed joint declaration at the Helsinki summit. And Russia suggested adding a clause that would call cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, power grids, water pumps, banks, and hospitals unacceptable. And sources said Moscow had proposed joint measures to prevent the use of cyberspace to destabilize internal political processes, including elections. The United States refused. The United States refused to get on board with that. So keep that in mind the next time you hear the corporate media screaming about Russia's interference and Russia's hacking our elections and Russia's doing that. You know, everything's blamed on Russia here. You know, my car has a flat tire. Oh, Russia did that. You know, waxy yellow buildup. Russia's doing that. Socks are vanishing from my dryer. Oh, it's got to be Putin. Got to be Putin here. I buttoned my shirt crooked this morning. Oh, that's Vladimir Putin again. It's amazing. All right, let's talk about the domestic politics. There's a lot going on here. The Manafort defense rested without calling a single witness, including Manafort himself. And I think this may signal that Manafort is not rolling over on Trump. And it may just simply be, and I'm a little surprised, because I thought they were going to call Rosenstein, who had actually investigated Manafort for these exact same charges something like 8 years ago, and said, we're not going to prosecute. I thought they'd at least call him. I don't know, maybe Manafort has Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's lawyer. You know, the one who walked into the courtroom and told the jury, yep, he did it. He's guilty as all heck. Getting on back to the story, or the saga, if you will, of Omarosa Manigault Newman. The Trump campaign has filed a lawsuit against her, both for the comments she's making in the media today and the contents of her book, claiming that she has basically violated the non-disclosure agreements she signed, not just for her time on in the White House, but apparently there was one signed for her appearance on Celebrity Apprentice. A lot of non-disclosures in the entertainment industry. You wouldn't believe, I don't even remember how many of those I've had to sign. But she could be in serious trouble, and any money that she makes on that book might wind up in Trump's pocket here. Now, Omarosa was on the Today Show, and it didn't go well. Omarosa was telling Savannah Guthrie, you know, to calm down. You're asking questions way, way too fast. And the Today Show played a copy of that recording Omarosa made of John Kelly firing her. Now, Newman said that she recorded the conversations to protect herself. There is a problem. The conversation took place in the Situation Room, which is a no devices area, And Omarosa could be in legal trouble for having done that recording inside the White House. Okay. Antifa is still out there making a ruckus, and a lot of people are wondering, how is it they're able to get away with all this violence, with threatening the lives of other people, including the president? They just seem to get away with it. Nothing gets done. Antifa is out there screaming they want to shoot their political enemies. The corporate media is basically just writing them a blank check. NBC refused to even report on their own reporter and camera crew who got beat up by Antifa. All right, we're going to grab a phone call from Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Hey, I just wanted to ask how Claire is doing, first off.
She's doing a lot better. She's doing a lot better. She has to go to the doctors this afternoon, though.
And before I leave, I've been meaning to ask you this question, or actually ask Claire this for a long time. Just how many goddamn T-shirts do you have? Have you ever counted those up?
I haven't counted them up. Actually, I go through a lot of them, you know, and a lot have been thrown away and everything. But people send me these things. This one I'm wearing today was a gift from one of the listeners here. It's got that Jesse James quote about the real outlaws are the bankers, and I made the mistake of actually wearing it into my bank a couple of weeks ago, which caused a little bit of a stir.
Hey, Mike, I wanted to call in because I know you're probably aware that I send a lot of articles into you and Claire,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And for the last week and a half, I've been unable to send you anything, and it says it's been identified as spam. And if it is spam and you don't want me to do it, let me know and I won't do it. But I left my number with your call answering guy. If you want to call, I'd be happy to do that. I spent a lot of time doing it.
No,
I'm just unsure whether I'm being censored or
no, not from this end. Yet. Not from this end. One of the problems we've had with getting our email out through Spectrum, because it's also happening to us. Claire was trying to send an email to somebody, a music associate in Great Britain, and it kept bouncing. And we got that same thing about spam. The problem is there was a compromised Spectrum server in Kansas. And what happens when a hacker gets into a server and they use it to send out spam, it trips off the spam filters downstream, who will then start rejecting all the email coming from that server until the problem is cleared up. So, but no, you're not banned from, you're not banned on my website. You're not banned on my email.
Well, you know, I thought maybe there was some sort of surreptitious, you know, unbeknownst to you or anybody, that they're, you know, censoring, in which,
they
you know, you never know.
They could very well be. Some of the deep links in my website are now being redirected, and it's not happening at my site or my server or at my hosting company. It's happening upstream. But yeah, they're desperate to try and keep certain things from getting on out, and they play dirty.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'd be happy to keep doing that. I don't know how I can do it and get through to you, but I just wanted to let you know that. I'm a Spectrum user myself. My email goes through Spectrum as well, so that may be the problem. But with all this stuff with Facebook and Twitter, and it's so heinous and sinister, really, that you just never know what's going on. That's why I wanted to ask you. So
yeah, well, I'm looking at my mailbox and I am getting email at the What Really Happened address, but so it's got to be a server somewhere between you and I. Anyway, listen, Peter, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And once again, we are standing in front of you with our hand outstretched and begging for your assistance to stay on the air, to keep replacing equipment that wears out very rapidly, especially here in Hawaii with our salt air. It all behaves like it's made out of compressed rust. So the postal address where you can send a check money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Road, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can do a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. And let us go on back to the phones to Layla in Ontario. Aloha, Layla. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. First of all, I'd like to apologize to your audience that was listening yesterday. If any of them are listening today, my discussion with you about a lovely lady that will remain unnamed, as I should have left her to begin with. You were very patient with me. There are sometimes when what we think we assume is automatically known by others, and that's absurd. I was referring to the concept of the medium as the message.
Yes.
But anyway, I will, if you don't mind, ask this lovely lady who seems to demonstrate a great deal of compassion. Hide yourself, cover up, go into the Palestinian territories, go into Gaza, because you've got a U.S. passport. Israelis are not allowed to go into Gaza or the West Bank. Otherwise, the Israelis fear their people may actually develop their compassion. Go in there and see what's going on, and then take the message back to your father. See if that might awaken in him a little more resolve, not only for his own people in the U.S., but for the people that are suffering not silently. They're beginning to rebel finally. The other thing I wanted to find out is what is going on with Antifa. I mean, have they calmed down? You mentioned them briefly. The legal issues are so complicated, they're going to go on forever. It's going to be almost impossible for most of us to understand. But the Antifa is what scares the hell out of me. I mean, I'd love to come back to the U.S., even just to visit. But I sometimes wonder about whether I'm going to encounter crowds of chaos here or there. How widespread is it really? I know the tendency of the media is to take a spectacle and then generalize as if that's the norm.
Yeah, that tends to be the case here. I mean, that's what happened here in Hawaii with our volcano. I mean, if you actually look at a map of the state and look at where our volcano was erupting, it's just a tiny, tiny corner of one island. And yet the media blew it up and made it look like the entire island was melting down, the entire state was melting down, and as a result, we've lost a lot of our tourism. And now that the volcano is slowing down, maybe we'll start to get it back. I hope we start to get it back here. But you're right. Antifa plays to the cameras. They play to the microphones. And so they're not widespread. I mean, they show up at these planned and staged events like the Unite the Right gathering, which actually was pretty much a fizzle. Hardly anybody showed up, and that's why Antifa wound up having to basically whoop on the police and the reporters. But they strike me as a manufactured group, and I'm not sure what their agenda is, but the actual practical result is they're turning off the American people, and because Antifa along with Black Lives Matter, are linked to the Democratic Party, I think it's actually going to be a negative going into the November elections.
That's interesting. I hope so. I hope you're right. There is one thing I wanted to mention to you. I've referred to it briefly in emails. And by the way, I think it's Peter in L.A. I've been lucky so far. My emails seem to be getting through to Mike. And I'm in Canada. Perhaps that has a lot to do with it. But I wanted to mention something that might be of interest to your listeners. I was once, and this is a long time ago, because a lot of the good stuff is no longer on the internet. It used to be a marvel of information. But I found the original manifesto of the ship on which we came over in June 1947. And all of the names of the, Ellis Island used to be reserved only for immigrants. Yet on the manifesto, there were names that were typewritten, and they had my name, my father, my mother, my sister, and a couple of other relatives. And then all of a sudden there was handwritten names that were listed as American citizens born in the U.S., and they were all Jewish names. I recognized them, and I was stunned. And I thought, wait a minute, if these were born in the U.S. and are citizens, what are they doing coming in through Ellis Island in 47? And I realized that much of what is happening now with the Democrats importing voters was going back even then. So,
it does sound like it, or maybe they were granted citizenship, after World War II. Anyway, Layla, got to put you on hold. Got to do another commercial break. Don't hang up. We'll come right back to you after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're on the phone with Layla in Ontario. And Layla, just kind of pick up where you left off.
I couldn't find the original manifesto. I went to Ellis Liberty Island and chose just one Jewish name and found tons of them, many of them with their correct information listed, but tons of them as having been born in the U.S. or living in the U.S., and that seems incredible if they were coming into Ellis Island, because that was only reserved for those who needed investigation for health and any other circumstances.
Well, let me ask you let me ask you a question here, just to play devil's advocate here.
Sure.
There are two possibilities. One is that obviously a lot of Jewish people were fleeing Europe after the end of World War II because it had been very unpleasant. But when a ship was coming in from Europe, it's not like they could dock one place and have all the legal citizens get off and then go over to Ellis Island. So I question the idea that only the immigrants were processed through Ellis Island. I think basically the ships coming in from Europe went to Ellis Island, and as people got off, if they were U.S. citizens, they showed their passport, and they were allowed to simply pass on through.
Yes, but specifically with mine, it departed from Israel or Palestine, whatever it would have been called. In 47, it would still have been Palestine.
Yes.
It wasn't actually Israel until May 48. So those is where I found the origin, and I know the name because the name is someone who writes for one of the common or most well-read Israeli newspapers. But that started me searching further, and there just seemed to be too many with ships' names that were not even included. But anyone is curious, go to Ellis Liberty, and just look into it, because I understand there was a second port that was where people who were considered Americans did actually disembark rather than Ellis Island. The other ironic thing I did, well, anyway, I won't even go into that, because I also found online what might have been ancestors of Donald Trump. And some of them were, well, I can't confirm that they actually were related, but the name was there, and I won't go into it. I will just ask your listeners, your audience, your followers to pay a little more attention to what's happening in Yemen. The atrocities that are going on there are just so painful to even just to look at in a cleansed article online. BBC still, ironically, seems to be covering stories like that while the U.S. media is ignoring it. Canada, we no longer have even a pretense at a media here. Post Media owns most of the outlets here, and the National Post is the main outlet, and they get all their information. They just basically reprint from the Washington Post. As for the New York Times, we know that Carlos Salim, or Carlos Slim, as he likes to be called now, is one of the owners of the New York Times, and he's actually of Lebanese origin. But obviously, where money is concerned, there's no such thing as loyalty. So there are a lot of things that Americans need to be aware of, because it is their country, their future, the generation to come that they have an obligation to. Each of us has an obligation. There's one thing that in the liturgy of my church that impressed me, and it never really touched me until the day that my mother was buried, because she was my last link to my ancestry, and it was the most devastating experience of my entire life. So that phrase stuck in my mind: from ages unto ages, we are all linked. And for me, the link was broken. But there is a responsibility that we have both to our ancestry, and I don't just mean the specific ancestry, but to humanity in general, and to all those who follow after us. Not only do we have to leave the world in a better place, we have to try and elevate the values of humanity and not debase them as we have. Unfortunately, that's where Hollywood has played a great role in the service of making us so vulnerable to allowing ourselves to be debased. I think I've taken up enough time. I'll let you go, Michael. Thank you for letting me call in.
Well, thank you very much for the phone call, and I agree with you on pretty much everything that you said. Yeah, I hold it as the highest moral imperative that we leave the next generation a better world than was left to us, and sadly, my generation has failed. And my generation, we're coming to our ending times, and it doesn't look like we're going to leave a better world to the next generation. The millennials are really in a lot of trouble right now.
I'm brokenhearted. All I can say is that thank God my son was born before all of this started. And because of it, he's determined. He always wanted to be a father, because he had such a great relationship with my husband. But unfortunately, he now will not be marrying, and he certainly will not have any children. And that breaks my heart. It's sad, because there must be many men like him.
It is. I'm a frustrated daddy myself. When I was growing up, the one thing I wanted to be was a father, and it just never worked out. My first wife got an abortion against my wishes, and but Claire and I are the world's greatest auntie and uncle, and all the kids in the neighborhood love us because we spoil them rotten.
I think we all see that. I have to say, I think the two of you are so. It is a joy to watch you together, because it's so rare to see a couple today with such a bond and such obvious affection for one another. It's a pleasure to watch you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be in that relationship, you know. And I got very, very lucky with Claire, and you know, I love her dearly, and I'm doing the best that I can to take care of her. And like I said, she has to go to the doctor this afternoon, but overall, she's getting better, and now we're looking at finding out, you know, just how fragile she has become. And I've got to be the only husband on the planet who has to beg his wife to let him do all the housework. So I don't want to take any chances. After what happened in January, I don't want to take any chances.
On that note, my husband, who taught at a university, while I was off pursuing my career, was probably one of the first men on earth who proudly announced that he was a house husband. And he, by the way, was part Ojibwa. So that would, and maybe amongst the Ojibwa, helping out with the necessary functions of everyday life was not a disgrace. But that he is a man that I miss terribly. He was a very unique person. He had a very special way of looking at things, and there aren't many people like that. And it probably was his Ojibwa heritage, because he learned a lot from his Ojibwa father. But anyway, once again, thank you for letting me speak, and take care of yourself, and my best wishes to Claire.
I'll pass those along to you. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Rick in Fort Lauderdale. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I was inside when I called you originally, but things happen. I'm outside. I'm going to throw something past you that I learned, and I want to know what your opinion is. But I guess this Alex Jones and InfoWars are getting shut down. The actual webpage, yes. I know YouTube and all that stuff. there's a conglomerate effort going on, and a buddy of mine who's retired Navy intelligence, a good guy who also listens to you, like I listen to you first and foremost, told me that the communist red Chinese are the key factor for all this effort.
That
I just want to know what your opinion was.
I'm rather. My question is, why would the communists and Chinese be all that concerned about it? We have all these American politicians who are out there saying we've got to shut down the independent media to preserve, our institutions, blah, blah, blah. And it's not just Alex Jones. I mean, they're talking about just across the board shutting down all unofficial, all non-government approved media. And yes, apparently the Infowars.com website was taken down. If you go there now, there's just this green page with links to the other pages, and we don't really know exactly what happened. It may have been the server crashed, or it may have been attacked. My server's getting attacked these days again. So it really is a fight. They're trying to basically silence the truth. And whether it's because of the upcoming midterm elections or an upcoming false flag, or just that corporate media is tired of the competition, but it's definitely going on.
Yeah, well, Mark Levin had a guest speaker, a guy who did a book on about 25 years of research on China. At the same time that was going on, there was also another speaker on this Alex Jones show mirroring the same information, and apparently it caused a big tidal wave of concern. I didn't know this. I didn't know that China owns about a quarter or three-quarters of Hollywood, the movie picture thing. I know you know your stuff about that. Maybe you could dispel it or substantiate that. I don't know.
Well, a lot of foreign investors have tried to come into Hollywood over the years. For a while, it was Japan was trying to buy up all the studios. And they find the studio system so corrupt and impossible to control that eventually they bail on out. I'm not buying the idea that China is behind the attacks on the independent media. I don't think they really care. In fact, I think China's geopolitical interests are best served by allowing the independent media to continue. I think this is purely domestic. Corporate media, government, the vaccine companies, the GMO companies, the Democrats. This is definitely internal censorship.
Well, I hope they don't get to you, because you're where I go first for my news. But I know, this is definitely Stalinist type stuff going on.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Ken in New York. Aloha, Ken. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. I just got a letter from an organization that I've participated in a letter writing campaign about 5G, getting rid of not allowing 5G poles. It's called nysuma.org, and what they said was that due to the efforts of the organization, they've gotten funding for 5G successfully, it says, defeated and dropped from the budget, and that's for the state of New York. And they also have 300 complaints were received by the the Utility Public Service Commission about smart meters, and that is causing them to sit on it temporarily. But they say that there is an effort in Congress called a Streamlined Small Cell Deployment Act. It always sounds so nice and squishy. S.3157, and this could be a problem as far as Congress. Apparently it's pressure being brought to bear by some industry interests.
Okay.
And that's basically it.
Well, I know a lot of people are expressing concern over 5G, but 5G is just a faster version of 4G. And while I think there should be a concern about the overall exposure to electromagnetic radiation that we're experiencing in our environment, I don't think you can point the finger at any one device and say that's the culprit. Again, the 5G energies are really low level, and it's just a faster version of 4G. So I think the concern is a little overblown, and That's my
Well,
opinion.
I think that the concern might be about 5G. While it is lower, the idea is that it could potentially be on every telephone pole up and down a block, and perhaps that's the problem.
I think you're going to have you're going to see 5G basically just installed into the existing towers. There's no reason to put up new poles or anything. If you look at the existing cell phone towers, they've got 2G, 3G, 4G, 4G LTE. They'll just put the 5G into the same units.
Oh, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to Chuck in Texas. Aloha, Chuck. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Michael? Had a couple of subjects. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you just fine. You're on the air.
Okay. Yeah, I want two subjects. Gab AI, and ask if you know of another alternative, because it looks like they're going to end up being taken off because they've left themselves vulnerable to Microsoft. The other thing being, the reason that they're vulnerable to Microsoft is because, in my opinion, they have a lot of agent provocateur trolls who are on there posting some of the most vile things they can come up with, just over-the-top racist stuff.
Yes.
And internet anonymity. I think that if Gab did what Facebook said, you have to confirm who you are, no more fakes. Well, of course, Facebook still lets them do it if you're a liberal. But I'm not a big fan of internet anonymity when people are going to be posting things. Because if you're going to post something, you need to put your name on it. Posting it anonymously is a great way for the trolls to be able to take over things, for the agent provocateurs, the professional Israeli poster to be able to post whatever they want, and just lie. So you agree? I'm kind of surprised. And most people argue with me that say, oh, no, we have to have internet anonymity. I disagree. But
well,
do you know of
it's a gray area, because people who are trying to blow the whistle on corruption, they need to have anonymity. So the argument could be made they need to be anonymous. But you're right. One of the tactics that is currently being used against all of the independent media are agent provocateurs or trolls or shills or whatever you want to call them, who will basically get on these platforms and they'll post this really vile, over-the-top, racist stuff, and then they immediately turn around and complain to the hosting company, oh, look, there's all this racist and vile stuff on this blog, you got to take it down. And usually these companies, these social media companies, they don't even really check. There have been websites that have been accused of racism and taken down, and there isn't actually any racist content on there because nobody's really checking unless the webmaster contacts the hosting company and says, would you please show me where I did this? And then they'll come back and say, oh, well, I guess it was a mistaken situation, and they'll put you back up until the next troll shows up to post vile things. Anyway, listen, Chuck, got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right back to the phones here to Jim in upstate New York. Jim, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. Pleasure to speak to you. I've been wanting to call you for years. I really, truly appreciate your computer input into the show. I'm not a 3D Studio Max guy like you, but I have a different avenue. I use SketchUp and V-Ray as my engine, but yeah, it's a great avenue to go. But I've always wanted to call you up, just say, I truly, truly, truly love your show. I love how you did that commercial also. I knew, who's the guy that wrote that commercial?
That was one of our other hosts on the air.
No, you truly, you know what it was? It inspired me to donate to RBN.
Good.
And
thank you for the donation.
I just want to, yes, and I just want to put out there that shows like yours, I'm I'm a computer nerd too, you know.
Okay.
And you're an XP guy too?
Well, actually, most of our machines are running Windows 7 now. I've got a couple of laptops that are still running XP and 2 Linux machines.
Yeah, I have my XP, machine that I keep offline. It's just interesting, but truly, there's another thing I want to bring up with you is that I happen to not personally know, but inadvertently know Donald Trump, and his upbringing when he was a kid. He went to the New York Military Academy. It's not West Point.
Yeah.
And when he was a kid, he was a bad boy. And what it was, New York Military Academy was the place where the bad kids went. And I have a number of friends that went there. And, the guy truly is not, his heart is in the right place. You know what I mean? General Tobias was one of his teachers.
Yes.
And, or Colonel Tobias, I should say. And I think, he gets a heavy rap, just for being him, But he's a great guy. I met him personally, and I don't know what your feeling is, but I just would like to know your opinion, why you think, he's a devil in disguise or whatever.
Well, I'm not saying he's the devil in disguise. I mean, after all, I did support him in 2016, mostly because I didn't want Hillary in the Oval Office here. But he's been a bit of a disappointment. He's clearly dropped the ball on the Vaccine Safety Commission. He actually shut down the Voting Integrity Commission. And I understand that he is being blocked by the bureaucracy. But he's still plunging us into these wars and the unfettered support for Israel. He has in many ways been a disappointment. Doesn't mean I think he's the devil in disguise, and I wouldn't mind meeting him myself because he seems like he's a fun guy.
He's a great guy.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for the input.
Nice guy.
We got to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to take a phone call from Laura in Michigan. Aloha, Laura. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
I'll tell you what's on my mind. The fellow that called in said that Hollywood is run by Chinese. He needs to go to davidduke.com. And David Duke only uses articles from Jewish publications. And one of the articles is Hollywood, so Jewish. So you need to research that a little bit more. I don't think your friend was putting you on the right track.
Well, I did work in Hollywood, and I do know that, yes, in point of fact, that Jewish people are disproportionately represented in top management positions.
And the book, Neil Gabler's book,
Yep.
An Empire of Their Own, is a good reference book. That's a good one to read. Neil Gabler. Also, I want to talk to Layla and tell her my grandmother was French Canadian, and we had Indians had married, Ojibways had married into our family. Well, when I had my DNA done, I had only European DNA, and upon further research, I realized a lot of the East Coast Indians actually came over from Europe during the Ice Age. I didn't have any Native American. All my DNA showed was European.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the Ojibwe Indians, Chippewa, Algonquin, were actually European Indians. It's very fascinating. You might want to look into it.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of fakery out there. I mean, Elizabeth Warren was out there, and they finally admitted that no, she isn't actually Native American here. Do you remember Iron Eyes Cody?
No.
Okay, was a very famous actor, always played Native American roles. He did this wonderful commercial for environmentalism, The Crying Indian. He was not Native American.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he was actually Italian.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So all along I thought I had, Native American. There was no Native American in my DNA at all. It's all European.
Yep. Well, I'm not going to get one of those DNA tests. For one thing, they can be very inaccurate. Two, they then own your DNA. And there was an article that we ran on whatreallyhappened.com today where apparently getting one of those tests can affect your ability to get life insurance. Because if something turns up in your DNA that shows you at high risk, you know, it gets shared with the insurance companies.
The one that gives you health risks.
Sorry?
It's strictly the DNA. I wouldn't go for the health ones. You're right.
Well,
I did all this before all this came out.
Once they've got your DNA, they can check for anything that they want. Anyway, Laura, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go and get on back to some of the news here. Now, Judicial Watch has come on out raising some questions about the handling of Imran Awan and why there has been really nothing done about the grave national security implications resulting from this guy who ran the House Democrats' information technology. Last year, he was arrested on bank fraud charges in Dulles International Airport while trying to flee to Pakistan. And even after getting fired by some members of Congress for stealing computers and data systems, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who at that time was the Democratic National Committee chair, kept him and let him have access to her emails and files, as well as the password to the electronic device she used for DNC business. And so Judicial Watch is saying they're not seeing any kind of an investigation going on here. What they're seeing is there's some kind of a cover-up. So my question is going to be, was Imran Awan, in fact, committing espionage against the Congress, and was it linked to the potential espionage being committed by Hillary Clinton with her private email server? Because for somebody to be protecting Imran Awan and covering up for him, he's got some juice somewhere. The guy should be in jail for what he did. You know, they're going to nail him on the bank fraud, but nobody's investigating what happened with all those computers and what was he doing on those congressional computer networks. And it's known he did hack into a lot of computers that he didn't have permission to be there. All righty, now a story, actually there were 3 articles in The Hill this last week, and journalist John Solomon revealed previously undisclosed text and email discussions between former Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr and former MI6 agent and Spygate dossier author Christopher Steele. And Solomon's reporting also uncovered notes Orr took summarizing discussions he had with Steele's boss at Fusion GPS, Glenn Simpson. And what has come on out of that is that it appears that basically Bruce Orr based his entire request for an FBI investigation, codenamed Crossfire Hurricane, solely on that dossier, which we now know was completely nonsense. Complete junk. Okay, we're going to take a break to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. As we reported yesterday, Peter Strzok has been fired from the FBI. He's probably still working for the CIA. And a lot of people are saying, why did it take this long? And was there actually more than just the text messages? Now, Peter Strzok's been a huge embarrassment to the FBI. His text messages with his former lover, Lisa Page, made it very clear they were not being objective and unbiased, which is sort of required, or supposedly required, for an FBI agent during an investigation. But now they're wondering, was there something else going on here? And former FBI special agents, some who worked with the Office of Professional Responsibility for years, said they agree with the decision to fire Peter Strzok, and they said the system is broken, and that Deputy Director David Bodwich had no other choice but to step in and fire Strzok. And they say that political leanings, friendships, dual systems of justice inside the Office of Professional Responsibility have plagued how cases regarding FBI agents are adjudicated and handled. Short version, the FBI is just as corrupt as any other part of the government here. Another article coming on out from Real Clear Investigations points out that the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting between high-ranking members of the Republican presidential campaign staff and a Russian lawyer with Kremlin ties, basically that's the entire foundation of claims that Donald Trump colluded with Russia. Now, the lawyer, supposedly, the meeting was all about getting around the Magnitsky Act, but the Democrats are out there still screaming collusion, collusion, collusion. But there's a growing body of evidence indicating the meeting may have been a setup to basically get Trump's people into a compromising situation where they could say, Russians here, Trump's people here, collusion, it's proven, get rid of him. Now, we know that there was collusion with Russia, but it was coming from the Hillary Clinton camp, because Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee paid, through a law firm, they paid Fusion GPS to pay Christopher Steele, who in turn paid Russian assets, supposedly, to come up with this dossier, which turned out to be nonsense. That's clearly collusion. Now, there's actually nothing illegal about what they did. Collusion is not actually a crime under U.S. law. It just sounds bad. But the real collusion was between the Hillary camp and the Russians here. As you know, Judicial Watch finally pried loose documents confirming that the IRS targeting scandal under the Obama administration went all the way up to Lois Lerner, and it may have gone higher than that, but they got Lois Lerner basically documentation saying that, yes, this was all coming down from her. Apparently, a judge has signed off on the settlement between the IRS and hundreds of Tea Party groups, closing out the last major legal battle over what all sides now agree was unwarranted and illegal targeting for political purpose. The IRS has agreed to pay $3.5 million to groups that were wronged by the intrusive inspections, audits, delays of the 501c3, and insists they've made changes so that political targeting can't occur in the future. Well, that's what they said after they were caught doing that under the Nixon administration. Now, there's still a few arguments going on over in the courts, including whether former IRS senior executive Lois Lerner will be allowed to forever shield her deposition explaining her behavior from public view, and whether the IRS should pay the attorney fees. But this week's decision closes out the 5 years over the targeting itself. And $3.5 million is nice for those people who were wronged. But I'd like to see some people get fired. I'd like to see some people go to jail over this. Now, right now, we're having what's called the annual hacker conference. It's called DEF CON. And one of the highlights, or lowlights, if you will, Emmett Brewer, an 11-year-old boy from Austin, Texas, was able to change the result on a mock Florida election website, and it took him only 10 minutes to do it. Now, the website is a mere replica of the Florida Secretary of State website, but the hack points to larger vulnerabilities in the election infrastructure in the U.S. And then, of course, this article goes on to make the obligatory reference to Russia's meddling in the 2016 elections. The meddling actually came from much closer to home. But these days, it's mandatory for the corporate media. Whatever happens, tie Russia to it. Okay. According to this article, actually it's a YouTube video, voting machines used in 18 states can be hacked in under 2 minutes. Why, oh why, is Trump not getting on this issue? It may cost him the Congress, at least the House, this November, and it's definitely going to cost him re-election in 2020. And he doesn't seem to be all that concerned about it. All right, let's take a phone call from Mateus in Canada. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Remember the story you told a long time ago I think it was about the formation of one of the first banks of America or something similar to that. And the big establishment was promoting it. And that caused the people to go against it. But it was all a big trick because really it was bad for the people and the establishment wanted it. What was that all again? Could you just briefly remind me?
I think you're referring to the creation of the Federal Reserve.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds right. There was some reverse campaigning, some disingenuous campaigning by the establishment. So I just wanted to use that as like an example of what may be happening with Alex Jones, where we have this banned in Boston effect, which any really intelligent analyst knows will ultimately bring up his popularity. And if they were to remove the ban at some point in the future and let him have all his channels back, he would have a larger audience. And it does seem like Alex Jones is in the process of changing course more dramatically right now, because he's taking a position that he's blaming the Saudis for 9/11. He's reversing course on Boston bombing, Sandy Hook, Batman shooting, and he's promoting Iran war and North Korea war when those were hot topics. So it's almost like instead of him being revealed as a total sellout, they're banning him so that the people rally around him while he transitions. So what do you think of that?
It's certainly possible, and in point of fact, people are grabbing, the InfoWars app, and the readership of the website is up. The problem with that theory is that other websites are being taken down as well, and deplatformed. It's not focused just on Alex Jones. It's just that Alex Jones already has the existing user base where he can make a big stink about it, and it will get out there. There's a lot of other platforms that are being deplatformed, a lot of other websites rather, where they're having trouble getting the message out. So I think really it's a case where the corporate media and the powers that think they are have come to realize they're losing control of the American people, and they're desperate to get it back. And so, as always happens when a nation descends into tyranny, they have to impose Stalin-like censorship on anything that is not the official news. And I think that's really what's going on now.
Okay. If I was really going to get paranoid in conspiracy theory, then you could just say that to make this whole, let's say my theory is true, to make it really convincing, they banned some other guys at the same time, so this theory would look bad. But okay, that's getting carried away probably. Yes. Just the last thing, regarding those regarding the Dreadnought class submarines with the faulty fizzle tubes that you talked about, did they get that name after because now our enemies dread them not?
Yeah, well, basically it translates to afraid of nothing. And it's a classic British name. They've had many ships that were, they even had a class, a battleship called the Dreadnought. And that's basically what it means. We dread nothing.
Yeah, but now it's the enemies that dread them not because their launch tubes don't work.
Well, hopefully they're going to get those launch tubes fixed.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Michael. Have a great day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Okay, now let's talk about the economic news for a while. Billionaire Peter Schiff is basically looking at the numbers, and he's saying the government is lying about inflation to create the illusion of an amazing economy to keep investors and creditors happy. And this was something that we mentioned before, where we have almost 100 million Americans out of work, and yet the government keeps claiming that they're making record tax collections. And the two don't line up. And of course, the government is also saying we only have 3.5% unemployment. And as Paul Craig Roberts pointed out, if unemployment was that low, we would see wages and salaries being shoved upward. We're not seeing that. So the economy may actually be in worse shape than anybody really knows. And certainly the U.S. government is not going to admit it. They're going to keep on saying, oh, everything's fine, everything's fine, don't worry. You know, ignore that iceberg that just crashed into the bow of the ship. Everything's fine. You know, go back to your dinners and everything here. So another article, this out of Investment Watch blog, the synchronized growth mirage is fading, and Turkey is not the only country whose currency is melting away. Basically, at this stage, all around the world, all of the currencies that are based on promises are in serious, serious trouble. Only those few currencies that still have a commodity base are holding their value. And this is the reason why both Russia and China started buying gold like crazy, because they want to start backing their currency in gold, because they know what's coming for the fiat currencies here. All right, let's take a phone call from Mark in New York, Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Hey, Mike, I just heard that guy, I think it's Matias or Macias from Canada.
Yep.
What he said with Alex Jones. I've heard that, that he's controlled opposition and this and that. I don't believe. I think what the problem Jones is making or has made is he's tied himself too much to Trump. He's invested just about everything, his whole reputation, everything in Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has shown he's not worth it. He's either a fake, total fake Trump, or he's too stupid to know what he's doing. At least when it comes to how to run a country and how to deal with enemies. He thinks he's running a business or something like that. He's building some kind of resort in I don't know where, and thinks anybody who works for him is going to be loyal to him. He doesn't understand what's going on. Then he puts people like Bolton and Pompeo and others, and he puts somebody like the guy who's this Mnuchin there as Treasury Secretary. He doesn't know what he's doing, and it's coming close. And now Jones is finding out what's really going on when Trump is even backing him up with this, with the way the high tech is trying to attack it.
Mark, I got to put you on hold. Don't hang up. We got to take a break for commercials, and I'll come right back to you after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Mark in North Carolina. We're talking about Alex Jones. And, I have to be very honest, following Alex and my parting of the ways, I don't pay a lot of attention to him. And there are areas in which we do not agree with each other. But I think you're right. I think Alex Jones did invest heavily in Donald Trump in 2016, as did I. And then when Trump started to not live up to many of his campaign promises, I was very forthcoming in saying, I'm disappointed. I'm still glad I supported him because I didn't want Hillary in the Oval Office. And I think Alex Jones was basically concerned about looking like he'd been wrong to his listenership, and basically stayed supporting Trump, and Trump is great. And in a way, he's sort of hoisted with his own petard, I think.
That's kind of true, because look, I invested in Trump too. I mean, I'm not a talk show host, but I went on all of social media. I kept on sharing things about Donald Trump, saying how I support him, now this and that. But I always had my doubts. I was I told you before, one of the jobs I've held was a correctional officer in Texas, and back in the 1970s and 80s, and before that, they had what they called building tenders. There were inmates actually ran the system.
Okay.
You had a few correctional officers, wardens actually. But the reason I'm telling you that is I used to talk to some of these old-time inmates who were building tenders and to old-time officers who knew the building tenders, and they said how much better they ran the place because they knew what the other inmates were doing. They knew where they were hiding. They knew where the gangbangers were. They knew how to stop the gangs from forming and all that. The reason I could compare, that's what I thought with Trump. He had kind of a sleazy background there, in New York City. You don't become a billionaire in New York City by being honest, okay, by being a choir boy. And I knew that. I knew he had sleazy connections and all that and knew where, but I also knew he knows where, and I thought maybe he was sorry for some of the stuff he did and really wanted to make amends and do something good for the country, and by becoming president and go after the very crooks that he probably dealt with. That's political crooks, politicians, and business people like Wall Street and all that. That's what I thought, and that's what I thought would happen. But unfortunately, it hasn't. He's let them co-opt him. I don't know whether he's afraid of them. I don't know whether they physically threatened him or his family. I don't know whether he's all right. Huh?
I said no. He isn't.
One good thing. He got us out of TPP. I was glad about that, and he got us out of that stupid climate accord, which I was glad about. But when it comes to foreign policy, like, look with Putin. All right, did the right thing. He met with Putin. They seem to get along well and everything else. Then he comes back, and he lets the deep state, I guess they threatened him. I guess they pretty much told him, you better get in line or else. And next thing you know, we got sanctions in Russia. And we got sanctions now on Turkey. And we got sanctions in Iran. This is going to backfire. This economy is on razor's edge right now. All these things, including the tariffs. I believe in tariffs when you're dealing with, third world countries or corporations that go to third world countries so they can pay, very, very cheap labor charges and bring their product back to the United States and make a huge profit and cost Americans jobs. Okay, but this is not when you're dealing with Germany, when you're dealing with Japan, when you're dealing with Europe. You're dealing with first world countries who build factories and stuff in this country as well as we build in theirs. Okay, you have, you Japanese build Toyota and other, even the South Koreans. I got a Hyundai myself. That's what I drive, a Hyundai Elantra. Mm-hmm. And they build some great cars, and they build a lot of them in the United States. So, I mean, and the Germans, of course, build it. So that's not what you want to put tariffs on. And then this nonsense about NATO, about they're not paying enough for NATO. I expected him to get us out of NATO. There's no need for NATO. It's a dinosaur. All it does is cause trouble and is a money-making thing for the military-industrial complex. And it threatens to get us into a thermonuclear war, and you know where that would lead. So, I mean, that's all it does. He should have gotten us out of there. He should have gotten us out of the Middle East. He should have gotten us out of all these places. Instead, now we got troops in Syria where we didn't even have them under Obama. It's very frustrating. The bombing of when a retard can figure out that Assad did not gas his own people twice in 2 years in a row. A retard can figure that out. I mean, somebody, with an IQ of about 40, all right? So, but he didn't, or at least he's not listening to the right people. He listens again to the deep state. And that's the only time, by the way, all the mainstream or the corporate media starts cheering him when he bombs somebody.
Yes.
And nobody seems to care about the people he's bombing. Nobody seems to care about Yemen now, what's going on in Yemen. Nobody seems to care about that school bus that was blown up and killed 50-something kids. Nobody gives a, about that. Lee, I do. And I mean, the media that I follow, and you do. But as far as the corporate media, no, they couldn't care less. All these people want is war, and make a lot of money. That's all. The heck with the people.
That's it. Mark, I have to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, welcome back to our show here. And let's see where we are. We're talking about the economic news. Turkey has announced they're going to start boycotting iPhones and other U.S. electronic products. So, yes, we're stuck in yet another economic war. And apparently Erdogan has announced a boycott of American electronic products in response to Washington's economic pressure against Ankara after the detention of a U.S. pastor in Turkey. Now, I don't know why this pastor was detained. Maybe he was diddling the little kiddies. There's a huge scandal about that going on over in Pennsylvania right now. Meanwhile, over in Italy, the new Italian government is planning on increasing public spending and public debt. It's promising to reduce taxes, introduce basic security, and reform pensions. And Northern League's leader, Matteo Salvini, surged in the polls, and the party is now the strongest in Italy. So, in short, it's a financial disaster waiting to happen. Their banks are still in trouble. You can't go on increasing spending and increasing borrowing. There's a finite lifespan for that. And it all goes back to those private central banks, which are designed to entrap nations and their people in permanent debt slavery. That's why the Rothschild family is as rich as they are. Over in Russia, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is saying that the role of the U.S. dollar as a global reserve currency may be diminished as more countries switch to their national currencies in trade. Well, that's already been happening for quite some time. But Lavrov is pointing to the fact that the dollar is now perceived as very weak because it has no commodity base on which to base its value. The only thing that backs the U.S. dollar is the government's promise to tax you or future generations of you to make good on all those treasury bonds. But there's a treasury bond bubble. There aren't enough Americans. Even if there was full employment, even including all the illegal immigrants, if everybody was fully employed, there aren't enough Americans to make good on all those treasury bonds. All right, let's take a phone call here from Daniel in British Columbia. Aloha, Daniel. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I wanted to talk about this little row right now that Canada and Saudi Arabia are having. It just seems ridiculous. It's Chrystia Freeland. She's our foreign affairs minister. And she goes and makes a Twitter comment about some activists in Saudi Arabia. And it's just ridiculous because, I mean, all the things that Saudi Arabia has done in Yemen, basically genociding the entire country, the Canadian government says nothing about, the UN aid workers being blocked from giving cholera medication, which could have easily prevented all the cholera. All the stuff that's happening in Gaza with Israel, shooting innocent children behind a fence. And they're very selective in their outrage. And it just seems utterly ridiculous.
Well, it is utterly ridiculous, especially, I mean, here in the U.S., even the corporate media had to pay attention to the bombing of that school bus. But as I said earlier in the show, what appears to be happening is that Saudi Arabia is going to make an example of Canada to send a message to the rest of the world that Saudi Arabia is willing to do business with other countries, but there is a line that may not be crossed, and that is commenting about Saudi Arabia's human rights records, or for that matter, anything regarding its internal politics. And Canada just got chosen to be the sacrificial lamb to sell that message.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. Another comment I had was regarding Alex Jones and Trump. If any of your listeners have ever seen the interview, it's about 20 minutes long, of Alex Jones interviewing Trump a few years back. And they started talking about the dancing Muslims in New Jersey on 9/11.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, but if Alex Jones doesn't know that there are Israelis that were dancing and were arrested after 9/11, then he's just not worth his salt. And another comment I had.
Well,
just a suggestion.
I want to step in here a little bit. Okay. Yes, it was dancing Israelis. The media tried to claim that Muslims were dancing and cheering after 9/11. If you go out on YouTube and do a search, there's a very old video of Alex Jones in his early days, just saying that he's a supporter of Israel and he always will be. And it was immediately after that video came out that financial support for his expanding operation started to pour on in. And of course, Israel is the issue over which Alex Jones and I came to a parting of the ways. But what's going on now is not about Alex Jones. It's about freedom of speech. And freedom of speech has to be universal, and it has to be absolute, or it's just permitted speech. And I don't agree with a lot of things Alex Jones says. I have the freedom to say, I don't agree with that. And Alex Jones, in turn, has the freedom to say, I don't agree with a lot of stuff that Michael Rivero says. That's what freedom of speech is supposed to be. But the attack on Alex Jones's websites and all these other websites that are out there, this is an issue of freedom of speech. It's not about Alex Jones personally. He's just, because he's so well known, he's sort of the icon of the independent media, he's getting a lot of the attention. But a lot of websites are under attack right now. A lot of people are being deplatformed. They went after Ron Paul's institution's managing director. Twitter canceled his account. And right now, basically, this is a war on anything or anybody that doesn't agree with the approved official version of the news. And so whether or not you like Alex Jones or not is irrelevant to the point. The point is that we have to fight for our freedom of speech.
Yeah, I actually agree with that 100%. In Canada here, we do not have freedom of speech. There was a pastor who was arrested where he had a Canada-wide warrant issued for his arrest for handing out flyers at a gay pride parade saying that, the gay lifestyle contributes to higher rates of STDs and HIV. And that kind of thing you never would see in the United States. So you need to fight for that First Amendment and that Second Amendment. And, as ridiculous as Alex Jones may be at sometimes, he does need protection.
Yes.
One other comment, just a suggestion, perhaps Leela from Ontario could be one of your third-hour guests, just because I just hang on her every word. I think she's amazing. And
all
I'll
right.
leave it at that.
We'll set that up. We'll set that up, talking about the Middle East. I mean, she's obviously an expert on Middle Eastern history and politics, and I'm sure she'd be happy to come on the show for an entire hour.
That'd be awesome. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. Getting on back to the economic news, and we're talking about the latest round of sanctions thrown on Russia. And as I mentioned the other day, you had this strange duality where Trump sent Rand Paul to Russia to hand deliver a letter to Putin saying they wanted to basically back off from the hostility and the tension, work toward more normal relations, and then immediately the State Department hits Russia with more sanctions, supposedly because of the Sergei Skripal poisoning, for which there is zero evidence Russia had anything to do with that. And the danger in this kind of duality is it's sending a message to the rest of the world that Trump may not really be in charge of his own administration. And a lot of foreign governments are probably wondering just who is calling the shots over there. Because it means they don't really know who they're dealing with. And that's a problem. Now, this article that came out of Zero Hedge is saying that these U.S. sanctions are pushing Russia closer and closer to war. And I'm sure the military-industrial complex would love a war. It's more money. But again, if you look at what war does to ordinary people, to the people forced to fight in the war, to the cities they live in. And I think it's time to put back up that video that Claire made. Well, Claire wrote the music. I did the video in Times of War. I think it's time to put that one back up again. Because we really need to understand this is getting very, very real. And I don't think the United States, even with its ability to print up all of the instant money that it can, I don't think the United States can defeat a military peer. They're really good at whooping on disarmed smaller countries who were dumb enough to basically trade away their weapons of deterrence in exchange for a promise of safety and security, which was never kept. But against Russia and China, I don't think the U.S. can win that one. And that means they would resort to the nuclear weapons here. Okay, over at Amazon, they are now banned from promising that the subscription to Prime will get customers next day delivery on all items. Apparently, it's not actually happening, and they're accused of misleading online buyers. And apparently, they're not delivering on that promise for one-day deliveries. So this is over in Great Britain where it is. Believe it or not, we have pirates in the Caribbean yet again. And vessels sailing in the vicinity of Trinidad and Tobago are now under threat of being victims of piracy for the first time since the 1700s. And according to a report from the Washington Post, because of Venezuela's economic collapse, criminals desperate to earn a living have basically gone back to the centuries-old crime of piracy, and they're attacking yachts and fishing vessels along the coast of South America. Now, apparently, there was an Italian ship attacked by pirates, and when Brazil basically went to rescue it, they discovered the ship was actually smuggling 1.3 metric tons of cocaine. So they don't know if the pirate attack was related to the drugs or not. So you get piracy and smuggling all in the same arrest here. Getting into the issues of refugees and immigration, the United Nations has given an unconditional green light for shifting the rescued to Europe. Now, what they mean by the rescued is very simple. You will see people from the Mideast and Africa who will sail out into the Mediterranean and go, help, 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 I'm in trouble. And these boats being operated by these non-governmental organizations, which in many cases are funded by George Soros, they'll pick these people up off the coasts of Africa and the Middle East, and they'll take them the rest of the way to Europe. And the United Nations is now saying this is okay. Not everybody agrees. And one of the areas where things are getting very, very tense is that these non-governmental organizations are refusing to respect the laws of the nations into whose ports they're sailing. They're acting like they're above the law. And apparently 2 of these boats, the Sea-Watch and the Sea-Eye, have just ignored the rules that are binding them in the Mediterranean into areas which are respective, Italian, Maltese, and Libyan, where the maritime authorities are responsible. And the NGOs have no business operating there. Now, at this point, if I were one of those countries and there was a ship coming on in that was refusing to abide by maritime law, I'd send the warships out there. Now, another migrant rescue vessel, the Aquarius, has been stripped of its Gibraltar registration. And the notice of removal was issued by the Gibraltar Maritime Administration because the ship was registered as a survey vessel but was being used to bring immigrants to Europe. And the registration will be officially revoked on the 20th of this month, and the registration will revert to Germany because the underlying owner is German. And Italy is demanding Britain take in the 141 migrants on board the ship because of its Gibraltar flag registration. So things are getting tense over there in Europe, as well as they should. Now remember up in Sweden, Sweden has just, welcomed all the refugees coming on in. They've turned into the rape capital of the world, no-go zones, all kinds of things. And apparently there was this rampage in multiple cities where migrants just firebombed hundreds of vehicles in Swedish cities overnight, which prompted the Swedish Prime Minister to say, what the heck are you doing? So again, it goes back to that wonderful quote by that British member of the European Parliament. If you import the third world, you will have third world problems. All right, let's take some phone calls. Mitchell in Memphis. Aloha, Mitchell. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I was just going to touch on the Alex Jones thing real quick. I think that there's a component to this that's not being discussed. I mean, I agree with a lot of the people. I don't like the government intervening and tinkering and corporations and so on and so forth. You know me. I would like to dissolve the government. As far as Alex Jones goes, is there a defamatory aspect to this or not? A lot of people are using the quote. I've tracked it down. I think it's Evelyn Beatrice Hall in 1906, and that's the quote that a lot of people are using. I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to your death the right to say it. Okay, and that sounds good, and we can go along with that. But what about say for instance, big voice bellowing Alex Jones is in a crowded movie theater, and he starts yelling fire, and there is no fire. Now, would you be willing to defend Alex's speech in that circumstance?
Well, you're talking about a hypothetical because Alex Jones hasn't actually done that. It seems like you're setting up a straw man argument. Anyway, listen, I'm going to have to put you on hold. We've got to take a break for commercials. Don't hang up. We'll come right back to you. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Mitchell in Memphis, and we're talking about freedom of speech. And opponents of unrestricted speech have used this argument before. Does freedom of speech allow you to shout fire in a crowded movie theater if there is no fire? Technically, yes. But then, of course, there would be lawsuits that would follow, for causing a panic. And there are laws that basically punish speech that is free, but is in fact inaccurate: libel, slander, defamation. So that's basically my view on that.
Okay, Mike. Well, I think part of this came about. I was looking at some of this stuff last night. I think some of this is regarding some of Alex Jones's claims with Sandy Hook, and some of the parents are saying they're being threatened, and one claims that they had to move 7 times. I don't know. I didn't go deeply into Sandy Hook. I will say this, that there's speech and there's a negative. I mean, there's something bad happening from Alex Jones' speech if this is all true. I am kind of curious. I mean, Alex Jones has a golden opportunity to get it straight about what happened with Sandy Hook.
Well, that may be one of the reasons why. That may be one of the reasons they're focusing on him, because, of course, there is a lawsuit underway right now where some of these Sandy Hook parents have sued not only Alex Jones but Wolfgang Halbig for basically saying they were lying about Sandy Hook, and it's a jury trial. And Halbig, makes a very convincing presentation that something is wrong with the official story about Sandy Hook. And maybe they went after Alex Jones to shut him down, because if the jury comes on back and says that Alex and Wolfgang are not guilty of defamation, then Alex is going to get on out there and say, see, there is a reason to doubt the official story. And there is. I took a good look at Sandy Hook. I've had Wolfgang on the show. The official story simply doesn't line up. For one thing, it's come on out through multiple sources. The school wasn't even an active working school at the time this supposedly happened. Internet records show that there was no internet traffic in or out of the building. Just looking at the photos of the building, as Wolfgang himself pointed out, it was in a deplorable shape that would not allowed to have students on it. Parts missing on the safety rails, mold all over the interior. It looked like it was being used for storage. And so, yeah, if the case against Alex Jones and Wolfgang Halbig is not going well, then definitely they would want to shut Alex Jones down to try and minimize the damage coming on out if he's found not guilty.
Now, let me ask you this, because and that was just one example of possibly Alex Jones running his mouth and saying, defamatory things. But there's another, the kid on there, Owen Schroyer on InfoWars, and I was just looking last night. He uses terms like in lines of the order of "they must be buried," "we must go on attack," "it's time to take the attack stance," "left, let's bury the left." They need to lock up. We have to end the left.
The left is saying,
is that not incendiary speech?
The left is saying exactly the same thing.
Would you want him on your platform?
Can I finish this? Okay. The left is saying equally inflammatory things about conservatives. You should have seen some of the banners out there being carried by Antifa over the weekend. Anyway, I got to let you go. We got to do a station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go back to the phones to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
If you don't like Alex Jones for what he says, you don't have to listen to him.
That's exactly right. And as I said earlier in the show, this is not about Alex Jones. It's about freedom of speech for us all.
And Alex Jones even though I think he goes sometimes crazy, screaming and stuff, which I don't agree with, because I think he looks more honorable not doing that, but that's part of his platform to get people in, you know. But he's right on a lot of stuff. He showed the deep state, and look at the shooting in Las Vegas. I mean, that was so obvious was something else was going on. I mean, come on. Nobody brings that many guns to a gunfight. Unless it's like Rambo. You know, I mean, come on. Nobody brings that many guns. There's something else was going on.
They don't handle them like that either. I mean, one of the things that stood out to me when I saw the photos of the interior of the room is the guns had just been dumped onto the furniture there. And anybody who's an actual shooter knows that you don't just throw guns around like that, because they've got little tiny bits that can break off. So it looked more like, you know, somebody was dressing a set.
But the whole thing is, Mike, look who he targeted. I mean, I'm a Democrat. I voted for Trump. Sure, he's messing up a lot of stuff. But, I mean, look who that shooter targeted. I mean, that was obviously some kind of intimidation job, not by just him. Maybe there's more. I mean, I don't know, but at least Alex Jones is bringing it out. That's the whole thing, Alex Jones. He's making you think, people. You got to use your critical thinking skills. Say, you know, why did the whole town in Sandy Hook, they all had their mortgages paid? And by the way, if that person moved 7 times, the Sandy Hook family, did they get their mortgages paid 7 times? I'd like to know that. You know, I mean, come on. Something went on there. Why was that school closed anyway, Mike? Was it asbestos or put on a dump?
It may have just been they didn't need the school to be open because they didn't have enough students in the area. But again, looking at the photos that were released of the interior, it's just jam-packed with boxes, and I think it was being used for storage. And Wolfgang thinks exactly the same thing.
I remember the father on the video was like seen laughing. I mean, that was so obvious. I mean, I was like, yeah. Like, if my son got killed the same day or the night, even the next week, I wouldn't be laughing coming out doing an interview. So, I mean, these are the questions people got. Yep. You can't say, well, you know, Alex Jones is deflammatory toward people. You know, well, but he made you think. The guy, you know, the listener just called in. You know, I mean, we got to think like something's. You know, did you do any research on Sandy Hook? You know, did you do any research on you know, on the Las Vegas shooting? You got to like use your critical thinking skill. Mike, I'm going to move on. I don't know how much time I got left. The guy in Turkey, Mike, the pastor, obviously he was part of an NGO linked to Gulen, and from what I heard, that because this goes back to Incirlik Air Base where some of the Air Force people were involved in that coup attempt, and the State Department's involved, the CIA is involved, and this guy was probably, well, from what I heard, feeding information to the Kurds for this. The CIA was they sent him in there to feed it to the Kurds. Because, you know, the Kurds is his arch enemy, Erdogan. You know, so that's what's going on. You know, and there's other spots. I mean, Turkey has a great intelligence service. I mean, it is over there in their part of the world, so they're not stupid. You know, so they know what's going on. You know, and this whole thing's unraveling, though, Mike. it's totally unraveling because the other people he's got in prison, they're all the spies. I mean, you know what a spy is? How much they pay somebody to do some kind of work. You know, that's a spy. You know, so this guy was an NGO. You know, I mean, people. Oh, he's a pastor. Well, they got pastors, school teachers, et cetera, waste management guy. I mean, you can have anybody as that type of a person. You know,
yes,
just don't say he's a pastor and give him a free pass. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because look at USA and all that. That's part of the same group. You know, I mean. Some shady stuff going on. That's all I need to say, Mike.
Yeah, it's very shady. But you're absolutely right. This pastor's arrest may be tied up with Erdogan is basically starting to move on the participants in that failed coup d'etat, and they're even threatening to literally invade the Incirlik Air Base to arrest the officers that are accused of assisting in this coup d'etat.
And Mike, remember when the coup? Remember Erdogan surrounded the base? That was like what? When the coup happened. Remember he had 100,000 troops surrounded the base.
Yes.
After the coup happened. So people don't remember that, but there was like a general or something on the base, or 2-3 people. Some of them fled that were in, remember the Turkish military of the general was arrested, I believe. I mean,
Yes.
I watched the documentary on that. So there's a lot involved. I mean, you know, some shady stuff, though. I mean, I don't know. It is all crazy. Hey, Mike, real quick, Caspian Sea. Did you see Caspian Sea's been in dispute for a long time. Did you see Putin and Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan and Iran? They all came together and they made a deal for the Caspian Sea because that has a lot of oil and large natural gas reserve. That's an important spot, and the U.S. wanted that spot for, you know, because of they've been pulling off in like Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan. But they just made a deal. I watched the video the other day.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's been going on, disputes for a while, right?
Yeah, they basically carved it up and everybody got an equal share. And of course, the United States is saying, you can't do that. You know, we need to come in there and take that from you. But it's another sign that the world is moving away from U.S. hegemonic domination, and they're starting to run the world without the United States. They're making their own choices. They're making their own economies. The U.S. is an empire in decline. There's no question about it in my mind.
Hey, Mike, real quick, I got still some time. I'm going to jump again. I just want to give my condolences to the people in Italy, but they got to get on the ball and say, enough to the EU bringing in refugees for Italy when they got a 25% unemployment rate for the young people there, and their infrastructure is rotting away just like here. So that's going to happen here, Mike. If you looked at that bridge, it looked like it was rotting when it fell.
When it collapsed.
I don't know how many people got killed. 40?
Well, apparently something like that, but apparently there'd actually been a warning issued about the bridge's integrity like a few years ago, and they just didn't have the money to reinforce it. And so it did collapse, and it was a horrible tragedy, and now they're on the hook to rebuild the bridge completely, or maybe they'll just say to everybody, too bad, you got to drive down the coast and use this other bridge.
And they're trying to blame the weather. Well, it always rains. I mean, it rains all the time. Like, you know, but the storm's not going to drop a bridge like that. That's a big bridge.
Yes.
I mean, you're talking 300-foot drop. You know, so that, I mean, I can't even imagine anybody like thinking about like drop it. You know what I mean? Like, that's horrible. You know, but all right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network right now. And getting on back to immigration and refugees, there's something very bizarre has been going on down in New Mexico. And this has to do with this camp where all these young children were being kept. Apparently, one of them died. His body was found buried on the grounds there. There's even talk that he may have actually been killed at the camp itself. And apparently, the guy who was running this camp was teaching these children how to be school shooters. Now, that is pretty serious stuff. And needless to say, the guy running it is the son of this apparently well-respected imam in Washington, D.C. Here's where it gets really weird. The judge in this case, Sarah Backus, ordered the release of 5 suspects who ran this school shooting training camp after one of their attorneys said they're only being targeted because they're black and Muslim as opposed to white and Christian. And the judge said, well, many people here live in unconventional ways. So just let them go on a signature bond. No money. Just let them go on this promise that they would come back and report for trial here. And CNN is trying to spin it that they were just training these kids to defend themselves, against, possible intruders. But no, these kids were being taught to shoot up schools. And the judges just let them walk. So, anyway, now here is another story about just how crazy PC has gotten. There was this professor, and John McAdams, who's a professor at Marquette, and he made the mistake of being pro-traditional marriage. And as a result, was harassed and fired. The university basically said, we have to have a fair and balanced view, and they suspended the professor. He had tenure. They couldn't fire him, and ordered him to apologize for advocating for traditional marriage. And the professor took his case to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, claiming quite reasonably that his contract does allow him freedom of expression without such punishments as permanent unpaid suspension. And the court agreed with him that the First Amendment and his contract says that he can say he is for traditional marriage. Well, a lot of people are for traditional marriage. And I think this militant approach from the LGBTQ community, where they're trying to force bakers to make gay wedding cakes, and they're trying to slap down people in favor of traditional heterosexual marriage, it's going to backfire. They should have stayed with acceptance, because they won that one. You know, people accept their lifestyle, you know, as long as it's not being rubbed in their face. But this new militancy of literally trying to force traditional marriage into the closet, that's going to backfire on them. Now, up in Canada, in Ontario, in the city of Hamilton, there's this anarchist group that have been ordered by officials to remove an anarchy symbol from its headquarters. And the officials declared the symbol is hate material similar to the swastika. Even the local police don't agree with it. And the local police disputed the label, saying the symbol does not meet the threshold of a hate crime. Doesn't the government of Canada or the government of Hamilton have more important things to look at than whether the symbols on buildings mean something here? Over in Hungary, they're getting fed up with this whole thing of gender studies. Hungary has simply declared sex is biologically determined, and the concept of gender as social sex, what you want to be, is utterly nonsense. And last week, Hungarian universities were given 24 hours to give their response to a government order saying that gender studies is not to be offered in the university to Hungarian students. Foreign students can still take these gender studies. But Hungary is saying it's just gone too far, this idea of gender fluidity and gender studies. And I have another question. What kind of a job do you expect to find with a degree in gender studies? That's what I want to know. So, now the Department of Justice is out there trying to claim that Russia was subverting the National Rifle Association. You know, Russia's pushing for Americans to have guns. You don't want to have guns, you're a Russian stooge if you have guns and things like that. And their entire case rests on the fact that 2 Russian citizens took out life memberships in the NRA, which currently has 5 million members. And 2 Russian citizens, oh my goodness, it's a Russian plot. It's a Russian plot. And the Russians, Maria Butina and Alexander Torshin, have a long, well-documented history as advocates for gun ownership. They themselves founded their organization called Right to Bear Arms, which is not an intelligence front organization of some kind. It's a genuine lobbying group with an active membership and agenda. Now, contrary to what's being reported in the corporate media, Russians are allowed to own guns, but the licensing and registration procedures are long and complicated, which Right to Bear Arms is seeking to change. But it's a Russian plot. The Russians are trying to get Americans riled up and armed here. Actually, it's the U.S. government that's getting us all riled up here. All right, so let's get back onto this issue of censorship. And as I said to the callers before, this is not about Alex Jones. It's about all of us in the independent media. It's about every single American citizen's right to freedom of speech. They're starting with Alex Jones. They're starting to spread out. They're going to take out the independent media, and then it will be censoring your speech or tricking you into self-censorship, which is a lot of what political correctness is about, getting you to self-censor your freedom of speech. Now, censorship is what happens when powerful people get scared. And that's exactly what I think is happening. All of these attacks on the independent media is the sign of a government that is very much afraid they have lost control of the minds of America. Same thing with the corporate media. They're scared now. They're trying to use the corporate social media to censor, because as a private corporation, it's going to make it harder for somebody to file a lawsuit based on the First Amendment. But somebody's got to figure out a way to do that. And like I said the other day, Infowars.com, when they get it back up, ought to have a big banner across the top telling their readers to take the stories they're seeing there and post it to Facebook and Twitter themselves. Facebook and Twitter can't just start shutting down thousands and thousands of accounts. First of all, they're going to lose a lot of ad revenue. Second, it's going to make more and more of the users of those platforms seek alternative platforms. And ultimately, it becomes a class action lawsuit over the issue of freedom of speech. Now, Twitter has apparently started suspending Twitter accounts for trying to evade suspension. And this is coming from Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey. So they're suspending accounts for trying to evade suspensions. Now, Facebook has taken down Latin America's Telesur, and sadly, nobody can stop them. More importantly, this is the second time it's happened. It happened in January of this year. And no explanation was given. Just the usual boilerplate, doesn't comply with our terms of service. This is right out of Kafka. You're being punished and you don't even know why. Just some remote, nameless, faceless person or algorithm unpersons you. Now, YouTube, which is already out there putting little blurbs in support of human-caused global warming, well, it's propaganda, underneath videos that question human-caused global warming. Now they're doing the same thing to vaccine videos, especially the MMR vaccine, where that triple mixed vaccine demonstrably causes a lot of harm. But YouTube is out there putting vaccine corporation propaganda right underneath, saying, oh no, the vaccines are great, the vaccines are wonderful, they're necessary, you've got to get your vaccine. Pay no attention to all those autistic children out there, because whatever the cause, they're not autistic because of vaccines. The CDC said so. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, Alex Jones is demanding that there be a congressional hearing into this issue of social media platforms deplatforming websites that do not conform to the official narrative, to which, of course, he wants to make a presentation. And it strikes me that, along with Donald Trump not responding to this, we're not hearing a lot from members of Congress, especially the Republicans, who have to understand that this targeting is going to work against them, because it's primarily conservative websites that are being the target of this here. Now, MailChimp is the latest platform to deplatform Alex Jones. And they did it without being able to cite a single violation of the terms and conditions. They just went and did it. Alex Jones shifted his videos over to Vimeo. They immediately banned him there as well. So this is pervasive. It's well coordinated. Somebody just sent me an interesting little article, and we may be seeing a replay of that. During World War II, the amateur radio system was shut down entirely, and virtually every nation rescinded, suspended, or canceled laws and regulations permitting amateur radio and informed their operator amateurs that they were forbidden to transmit radio signals in the air. Many nations required radios be surrendered. And obviously they were concerned about messages, you know, espionage. In other areas, they wanted to basically take those ham bands, make them available to the military. So this may be the beginning of that. We know that we're heading into World War III, and they want to silence opposition. They want to silence those of us who think World War III is a bad idea. Apparently, Facebook is being advised on how to flag propaganda by a NATO-funded team. And this is the media organization, sort of the propaganda wing of NATO, if you will. So that supports the idea that this deplatforming may be involved with something military about to happen. WordPress has taken down Fellowship of the Minds, and the site's author, Dr. Eowyn, has not been banned from Facebook yet, but he's expressing bewilderment over specifically which thought crime got his blog killed, and he may never know. They're just banning. No excuses given. It really is Kafka. And as I said before earlier in the show, this is not about Alex Jones. This is a matter of freedom of speech, our right to speak our mind publicly, to peacefully assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances, such as, let's stop all these wars before we lose the big one. And all these social media platforms have decided that you should not have the right to decide for yourself what you're going to read, what you're going to see, what you're going to listen to. They want to take that right away from you and decide for you what you will see. They want to take the internet and turn it into just another content delivery system like ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, to just shovel propaganda at you. Corporate propaganda, government propaganda. And no contrary views about anything. That's what they're trying to do. But like I said, there are a lot of other platforms out there. Real Video, for example, I understand they're doing very well. I'm still waiting to get my channel assigned, but apparently they're just swamped with people signing up to have channels over there. All right, apparently a security researcher has uncovered a new zero-day exploit in Apple software by tweaking a few lines of code. Speaking at DEF CON in Las Vegas last week, Patrick Wardle, Chief Research Officer of Digita Security, basically described his research into synthetic interactions with a user interface that can lead to severe Mac OS system security issues. Now, synthetic events are when attackers can virtually click objects in order to load code without user consent. If a threat actor is able to click a security prompt and load a kernel extension, the entire system is going to be compromised here. Oh, here's a good one. Somebody just sent me this. According to CNN, Alex Jones' hate speech is a form of terrorism. That's really out there. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And it's not just the independent media that is under threat over limitations on freedom of speech, because apparently the National Park Service is proposing revisions to Title 36 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 7.96, for the National Mall, President's Park, and other national parks in the Washington, D.C. area, proposing that there be a First Amendment permit for those locations. That's going to be it. If you want to speak out what's on your mind, you now have to get a permit for it. Remember a few years ago when they had free speech zones? They set up these little cages off to the side, and, you can't see anything out here. It might be you can go into that little cage and say whatever you want. Well, now they want a freedom of speech permit. So, all right, the FBI is warning that cyber criminals are plotting a massive hack against bank ATMs, including HSBC and Barclays, in a matter of days. And they're warning that there's going to be a global cash-out scheme, and British banks with large overseas interests have been made aware of the danger. Smaller banks with less sophisticated security are said to be most vulnerable. So, it's another one of these warnings where they know it's going to happen, but not enough detail to stop it or to arrest the miscreants, as it were. Now, there is a text message going around. It's called Nectar, and it's basically asking card holders to log in online to double their points. And Nectar is warning the message is not genuine. And urge cardholders who receive it not to click on the link and instead delete the message. There's a lot of emails that are doing that right now that purport to be from companies, and of course if you've never done business with the company, it's easy to spot. But a lot of them are from businesses you do business with, and it will say there's a problem with your mailbox or there's a problem with your account. Your account will be suspended if you don't fix this immediately. And they're trying to panic you into clicking that link. Now, depending upon your mail client, you can examine the actual link. In Microsoft Outlook, if you hover the cursor over the link, you can instantly see if the actual link there matches what's seen on the page. Because you can format the message in a way where there's actually a second email address that you go to. And if it's different, dead giveaway, it's a scam. Lots of scams out there. Now, Apple does seem to be working to build a driverless car. And apparently Apple has poached Elon Musk's former chief Tesla engineer. And it may well be that the engineer was looking at Tesla's current fortunes and thinking this might be a good place to get off, head for the lifeboats, as it were. I feel bad for Tesla. I agree. Electric cars are the wave of the future as soon as we can come up with a way to generate that electricity without burning up more fossil fuels. Because right now, the electric cars, as nice as they are, they're not green and they're not clean. Because the electricity charging those batteries is still coming out of petroleum products. Okay, we're going to take a phone call from Jim in New York. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I hear a lot of people on the independent media saying, it's important that we don't let Democrats take control of the Congress. I mean, does that, I don't, I'd be very careful about voting for Republicans. Are they Ron Paul type Republicans, or are they neocon warmonger Republicans?
Well, we've got warmongers on both political parties right now. The issue with not allowing the Democrats to steal, effectively, the House of Representatives is if they gain control of the House, two things are going to happen. Three things, actually. They're going to shut down all these investigations into the FBI and the Department of Justice and how this whole Russiagate thing came to be. They're going to start a whole new bunch of bogus investigations into Trump, and they're going to vote to impeach him as soon as they can find something that justifies impeachment. And that's not the way the system is supposed to work.
Yeah, no, you have a point, but I'm just like where I live. My congressman's Peter King.
Yes,
and he's a super neocon. And I voted last time for the Democrat just to get him out of there. And then you wait and you hope 2 years later you can get a Ron Paul type Republican. So
well,
I just
the Democrats
I'd be cautious about voting for Republicans. If they're good, then vote for them. But if they're super neocons like McCain and Lindsey Graham, I'd say let them lose.
Well, then we would lose the House of Representatives, and all these investigations that are trying to get to the heart of the deep state would just be made to go away. And we'd be right back where we started before Trump even got elected. And that's what the Democrats are hoping for. They're trying to stall everything out until November. And we already know there's been massive election fraud in the primaries. We know that they're counting on these 3.5 million illegal immigrants to vote in the elections, to vote Democratic. We know that there are places, precincts in this country where there have been twice as many votes as there were registered voters. So they're literally trying to steal the House of Representatives, and I'm one of those people who believes that cheaters should never be allowed to prosper. So thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go and get on back to the news here. Okay, down in Australia, they've passed this crypto busting bill, and the government promised that there would not be a backdoor built into this thing. So the draft of the Assistance and Access Bill 2018 calls for anyone using or selling communication services in Australia will be subject to police orders for access to private data. And that includes all vendors of computers, phones, apps, social media, and cloud services. And apparently the way they kept their promise of no backdoor is by simply asking for the keys to the front door. All right, 3 more data leaking security holes have been found in Intel chips as designers swap security for speed. I don't think it's that simple. I think these security holes are in there intentionally, because the government is very much afraid of what the people are thinking and saying, and they want total surveillance over all of us. Fourth Amendment be gosh darned here. Government has just decided they have a right to simply spy on all of us at all times for any reason. Look at the latest thing out of TSA. They're spying on people who they already know do not present a security threat. Because it means more money, it means more jobs for people who like being in the TSA. It's an absolute abomination. It's an insult to everybody who ever fought in a war to defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, to see how low this country has sunk. Now, as you probably have already heard by now, Monsanto lost that lawsuit brought by Dwayne Johnson. He's dying from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the jury was convinced that the glyphosate was the cause of his illness, and they hit Monsanto with a huge, huge fine. They awarded $40 million in damages and another $250 million in punitive damages. Now, Monsanto is going to appeal. They're going to try and drag this on out. Dwayne himself may never see any of the money, but his estate will continue to maintain the lawsuit. The jury found that Monsanto acted with malice and oppression because they knew what they were doing was wrong, and doing it with reckless disregard for human life. This is from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and he's saying it should send a strong message to the boardroom of Monsanto. Well, the message already arrived because Bayer, who now owns Monsanto, their shares plunged by $12.5 billion after the court case. But in the end, what did it was documents surfaced from inside Monsanto where they knew there was a cancer risk, and they hid it for years. And it's terrible to be living in a country where the government allows corporations to sell dangerous, harmful products as long as it makes money. Now, because of this court decision, other people who've been harmed by glyphosate are now encouraged, and Monsanto may now be dealing with a tsunami of lawsuits from cancer victims of Roundup herbicide. Now, Monsanto is already out there saying, no, this stuff is perfectly harmless. This stuff is perfectly harmless. No, I'm not going to drink a glass full of it. Think I'm stupid? And basically, the judge wrote, so long as an opinion is premised on reliable scientific principles, it should not be excluded by the trial judge. Instead, the weaknesses in an unpersuasive expert opinion can be exposed at trial through cross-examination or testimony by opposing experts. This was in response to Monsanto insisting that any criticisms of glyphosate were based on junk science and that the jury should not listen to the experts who were presented. But the jury did listen. And again, what did Monsanto in was their own paperwork, where Monsanto said, we know there's a problem. There's a cancer link. Already, one of Britain's largest home improvement chains, Homebase, is looking at dropping the entire Monsanto line of Roundup products. And I think we may start seeing that in all sorts of places. I think we're going to see a lot of people go back to finding natural, organic ways to control weeds. Because we literally live in a world where we cannot trust what comes out of those stores anymore, what harm those chemicals are causing here. Now, up in Canada, there's a farmer, Travis Hyde, and he is in the process of converting his 40,000-acre farm entirely to organic. Now, his farm is large enough to produce 2 million bushels of wheat per year. And, okay, he apparently one half of the farm is already half organic, partly organic, but he figures by 2020 it'll be entirely organic. And he's going to find people who are going to want to buy his product. Okay. Wharton School professor J. Scott Armstrong, in an interview, are more politically motivated. They're too focused on their own career advancement. They don't want to publish the accurate data on issues like climate change because they want promotions. They are not using the scientific method. Ought to send red flags flying into the sky. Another story on the same topic. This is from Steve Lindman's blog, Stephen Lindman's blog, about how experts are bribed to lie for corporate predators. And apparently the Organic Authority came out with a study showing how corporations will literally, they'll promise grants or other goodies to scientists and academics in order to crank out papers saying that things like GMOs are safe, vaccines are safe. Remember when the CDC came on out with their report claiming there was no link between vaccines and autism? And that report was definitely being used by the Vaccine Injury Court to deny a lot of claims by people whose children had been made autistic by the vaccines. And then the lead writer on this CDC report went public saying it was a hoax. It was an absolute hoax. They cherry-picked the data to get a desired conclusion. Remember, individual scientists are no more honest than lawyers or priests. They're subject to ambition and greed, just like any other human being. And again, that's why scientific method exists and why it should be applied rigorously to every scientific study, to make sure that the scientists' own personal biases are not influencing the outcome. All right. And, well, I'm going to skip that one. Apparently, there's a big stink going on where the FDA is no longer doing their own food inspections. They're allowing the providers to do it. Just like the FDA is no longer testing drugs for safety, they rely on the pharmaceutical corporations to write up a report and say, this is perfectly okay. It's a totally corrupt system. Now, another story, this came out of Johns Hopkins, and using the FDA's own documents, they proved that the FDA has known there was a problem with powerful opioids, and they did nothing about it because it was making money. The FDA is proving to be about as useful as the Securities Exchange Commission was with Bernie Madoff. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break, and then we will be back with the last segment of our program today. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And as if those poor people in California did not have enough problems between the wildfires and the illegal immigration, the Trump administration is now getting ready to end a 5-year moratorium and open up 1.6 million acres of California public land to fracking and conventional oil drilling. This, needless to say, is upsetting a lot of environmentalists. Now, the U.S. Bureau of Land Management said it's considering new oil and natural gas leases on BLM-managed lands in Fresno, San Luis Obispo, and 6 other San Joaquin Valley and Central Coast counties. Meanwhile, activists in San Luis Obispo are pushing a ballot measure this fall to ban fracking and new oil exploration in the county. Here is my currents there. Now, if you look at Fresno and San Luis Obispo on a map, what's running right up between them? The San Andreas Fault. It's a seismically active area, and they're going to start pumping liquids into the ground. This is an insane idea. It's absolutely insane idea. Speaking of the fires, 14,000 firefighters are now trying to deal with these devastating California fires, and it's caused, it's a record-setting fire. It's a big one, and firefighters are coming in literally from around the world, including New Zealand, to try and deal with this disaster. And they've got more than 1,000 fire engines, 59 bulldozers, 22 air tankers, 17 airplanes, 12 helicopters, and 11 mobile kitchens. And they're battling blazes on the Nevada border and all along the coast. 2 arsonists have now been charged for setting those fires. And needless to say, the global warming people are out there saying, no, this is all the fault of global warming. It's all the fault of global warming. Over in France, feminists have sparked a Twitter war by calling to ban sexist postcards. Now, if you go to any tourist area, and that includes right here in Waikiki Beach, along with postcards of the scenery, there are inevitably postcards of scantily clad, very sexy young ladies. And these French feminists are out there saying they need to ban them, you know, and it's actually backfired. A lot of people are saying these women are actually being sexist, they're being hysterical, and the women who posed for the photographs made a choice to do so. They probably got paid quite a bit of money. They don't need somebody's help to rescue them. And have you ever noticed that the feminists who scream about sexy women on postcards would never be asked to pose for postcards? There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. And meanwhile, please take what you learn here at Republic Broadcasting and whatreallyhappened.com, share it with everyone that you know. Especially make a point of talking about how this veil of censorship is being brought down around us to deprive us of our freedom of speech. and how dangerous that is, how Stalin-esque it is. It's time to wake people up and let them know the terrible direction this government is taking this nation. So we'll be back tomorrow, and aloha America.